Hello friends, welcome back my YouTube channel. If you want to watch the super hit movie Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children in full HD, then first of all, give this video a like, and if you are visiting our channel for the first time, then subscribe to this channel. The name of the movie we are going to discuss in today's video is Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. So we will give you information about how and where you will get to watch Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children film officially. Apart from this, we will give you a detailed look at the pre-production, post-production, budget, box office collection, and filming of this movie. A detailed review of the movie will also be given in this video, where we will explain the story of this movie in detail. We will also discuss the cast and casting performance of the movie. Apart from this, information about the music department and technical department will also be given. Because of this video is going to be very interesting and entertaining. So, you must watch this video till the end. And if you haven't liked this video yet, then like this video now and subscribe to this channel. So, let's start the video. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children is a 2016 dark fantasy film directed by Tim Burton and written by Jane Goldman, based on the 2011 novel by Ransom. The film stars Eva Green, Asa Butterfield, Chris O'Dowd, Allison Janney, Rupert Everett, Terrence Stamp, Ella Purnell, Judi Dench, and Samuel L. Jackson. Filming began in February 2015 in London and the Tampa Bay area. The film premiered at Fantastic Fest in Austin, Texas on September the 25th, 2016, and was theatrically released in the United States on September 30th, 2016 by 20th Century Fox. It received mixed to positive reviews, with praise for Burton's direction and visual atmosphere, but criticism for its plot. It grossed $296.5 million worldwide against a production budget of $110 million. Plot: A.B. Portman has told his grandson Jake stories about battling monsters and spending his childhood at Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children at Cairnholm, an island off the coast of Wales. The home's children and headmistress, Miss Alma LaFay Peregrine, possess paranormal abilities and are known as peculiars. One day, Jake finds Abe dying with his eyes removed. He tells him to go to the Loop of September 3rd, 1943. To cope, Jake begins therapy with Dr. Golan. She encourages Jake's desire to travel to the United Kingdom for closure regarding his grandfather's death. On Cairnholm, Jake and his father, Frank, investigate the children's home. It was destroyed during a Luftwaffe raid, but upon entering the ruins, Jake finds the children from Abe's stories. The children take Jake through a portal on the island's coast and emerge in 1943 with the house intact. Miss Peregrine explains she belongs to female peculiars named Imbrine, who can transform into birds, in Miss Peregrine's case, a peregrine falcon, and manipulate time. To avoid persecution for being peculiars, she and the children hide from the outside world in a time loop she created, set to September 3rd, 1943, and accessible only to peculiars. It allows them to live the same day repeatedly and avoid aging as long as they stay inside it. Jake meets the other children, including aerokinetic Emma Bloom. Jake is a peculiar like his grandfather and can see the invisible monsters from his stories, called hologhasts, or hollows. They are disfigured peculiar mad scientists who killed an Imbrine in a failed experiment to harvest her powers in an attempt to achieve immortality. Led by shape-shifting Mr. Barron, they hunt peculiars, primarily children, to consume their eyeballs. Mr. Barron and some of his colleagues consume enough eyeballs to become whites, regaining a visibly human appearance apart from milky white eyes. Wounded Imbrine Miss Avocet arrives, explaining that Barron assaulted her in her January 2016 time loop at Blackpool, England, killed her children, and is trying to repeat the failed experiment using more imbrines. Jake returns to 2016 to find that an elderly man has been killed by a hollow, so goes back to the portal to warn them that the hollow is near. He is followed by an ornithologist who is actually Mr. Barron in disguise. Barron had tried to extract the location of Miss Peregrine's loop from Abe, but his hungry hollow companion Malthus killed Abe before he could do so. He then posed as Dr. Golan, encouraging Jake to go to the island so he could lead him to the loop. Taking Jake as a hostage, Barron forces Miss Peregrine to trap herself in bird form and takes her to Blackpool, leaving Jake, the other children, and Miss Avocet as prey for Malthus and the other hollows. Malthus kills Miss Avocet, but Jake and the children escape just as the Luftwaffe raid destroys the house, killing Malthus. Without Miss Peregrine to reset it, the loop closes, leaving them stuck in 1943. Salvaging a sunken ocean liner, RMS Augusta, that Emma has used as a personal hideout, they travel to Blackpool and enter its January 2016 loop. They fight and destroy Barron's white and hollow allies, and rescue Miss Peregrine and other captive imbrines. When the last remaining hollow arrives, Jake avoids it, and it instead kills Barron, then is killed by Jake. Jake says goodbye to the children in 1943 while he stays in 2016 and goes to find Abe, who has not yet been killed since Barron's death in early 2016 has erased his later presence in Florida. After telling Abe his adventures, Abe gives Jake a map of international time loops. Jake serves in World War II and eventually reunites with his friends in 1943. Jake, Emma, Miss Peregrine, and the children journey to seek a happy time loop. Cast: Peculiars, Peculiar Adults. Eva Green as Miss Alma LaFay Peregrine, the strict but clever and caring imbrine headmistress of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children on Cairnholm. She can transform into a peregrine falcon and manipulate time. Terrence Stamp as Abe Portman, Jake's grandfather, who can see the invisible hollows. Callum Wilson as young Abe. Judi Dench as Miss Esmeralda Avocet, the imbrine headmistress of another shelter for peculiar children in Blackpool. Like Miss Peregrine, Miss Avocet can manipulate time. She can transform into an Avocet. Director Tim Burton makes a cameo appearance in the film as a visitor at the fun fair in Blackpool who gets a skeleton thrown at him by a hollow. Glenn Mexted, who previously worked with Burton as an extra in both Dark Shadows and the music video for The Killer's Here With Me, also appears in the same scene as a customer eating ice cream. Production: the film rights to the 2011 novel Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs were sold to 20th Century Fox in May of that year. In November, Deadline Hollywood reported that Tim Burton was in talks to direct and would also be involved in selecting a writer. On December 2nd, Jane Goldman was reportedly hired to adapt the story as a screenplay for the film. On July 28, 2014, Eva Green was set to play Miss Peregrine in the film. Misha Barton, Lucy Hale, and Alison Sudol were also considered. On September 24, 2014, it was announced that Asa Butterfield was being eyed for the second lead role as Burton's choice, but that at that time, he had not yet been offered the role. On November 5, 2014, Ella Purnell was offered a role and was in final talks to join the film. It was also reported that Butterfield had been offered the male lead role and was the favored choice. On February 6, 2015, Samuel L. Jackson was added to the cast to play Mr. Barron, while Butterfield was confirmed for the second lead role. Terrence Stamp, Chris O'Dowd, Rupert Everett, Kim Dickens, and Judi Dench were announced as being in the cast on March 12, 2015. Filming was initially set to begin in August 2014 in London. Principal photography on the film began on February 24, 2015 in the Tampa Bay area. Filming lasted for 2 weeks in Hillsborough and Pinellas counties in Florida. It is the second Tim Burton film to be shot in the Tampa Bay area, the first being Edward Scissorhands In 1990, production of the film later moved to Cairhayes Castle and Minions in Cornwall, and Blackpool in the United Kingdom, and Braschaat, a municipality close to Antwerp, Belgium. Filming also took place at Pinewood Studios. Music. Main article, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. The film score was composed by Mike Hyam and Matthew Margeson. The soundtrack was released on October 11, 2016 by La La Land Records and Fox Music. Florence and the Machine recorded the film's end credits song, Wish That You Were Here. Release. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children was originally set for a release date of July 31, 2015. The release date moved to March 4, 2016, then again to December 25, 2016, before finally moving to September 30, 2016. Home Media. 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment released Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children on DVD, Blu-ray, Blu-ray 3D, and Ultra HD Blu-ray on December 13, 2016. Reception. Box office. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children grossed $87.2 million in the United States and Canada and $207.9 million in other territories for a worldwide total of $295.1 million against a production budget of $110 million in the United States and Canada. The film opened alongside Deepwater Horizon and Masterminds, as well as the wide expansion of Queen of Katwe, and was projected to gross around $25 million from 3,522 theaters in its opening weekend. In total, the film earned $28.9 million during its opening weekend, finishing first at the box office. The opening was on par with Dark Shadow's $29.7 million in 2012, Burton's last big-budgeted film. Variety called it a mediocre start, given the film's $110 million budget. It had number 1 openings in Russia, $6.3 million, France, $5.3 million, Mexico, $3.8 million, Australia, $3.1 million, Brazil, $2.7 million, and the Philippines, $1.7 million, and the biggest opening for Burton in Malaysia and Indonesia. In South Korea, it debuted at number 2 with $5.2 million. The film was released in China and Italy in December 2016 and Japan in February 2017. Critical response. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 65% based on 258 reviews, with an average rating of 5.9 out of 10. The website's critical consensus reads, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children proves a suitable match for Tim Burton's distinctive style, even if it's on stronger footing as a visual experience than a narrative one. On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 57 out of 100 based on 43 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B+ on an A+ to F scale. IGN critic Samantha Ladwig gave the film a 7.210, summarizing her review with, "Though there are lingering questions about certain characters by the time the end credits roll, the film's striking visuals help compensate for its unemotional and anticlimactic script." Justin Chang of Los Angeles Times wrote, "Easily the director's finest work since his masterful 2007 screen adaptation of Sweeney Todd, and a striking reminder of what an unfettered Gothic imagination can achieve with the right focus and an infusion of discipline." USA. Today's Brian Truitt gave the film 3.5 out of 4 and wrote, "After a long run of dystopian YA movies for teen crowds, Burton is just the right guy to make cinema weird again." Calvin Wilson of St. Louis Post-Dispatch gave the film 3.5 out of 4 and stated, "Burton delivers his most ambitious and engaging film since Sweeney Todd 2007. Although the story becomes increasingly complex as it goes along, the emotional payoff is more than worth it." Michael O'Sullivan of The Washington Post gave the film 3 out of 4 and wrote, "The very idea of this, at once gruesome and darkly funny, is perfectly suited to Burton's sensibility, which also reveals itself in the casting of Butterfield, who has the quality of a young, slightly less freaky Johnny Depp. The Guardian's Jordan Hoffman gave the film 4 out of 5 and said, "We get the playfulness of seeing quirky magic powers mixed with the familiarity of how a time loop plays out. Add in Burton's authorial visual stamp, and what we've got is an extremely pleasing formula. It gels as Tim Burton's best non-musical live-action movie for 20 years. James Berardinelli from Real Views gave the film 3 out of 4 and stated, "Overall, despite feeling a little long and suffering from a rushed ending, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children is a fresh and engaging storybook adventure that should appeal to viewers both inside and out of the core demographic." The New York Times' Manola Dargis gave a positive review, writing, "The story gets awfully busy. You may get lost in 1943 or perhaps closer to the present, but it scarcely matters. Mr. Burton's attention to detail and to the ebb and flow of tone, scary, funny, eerie, as well as his sensitive, gentle work, particularly with the child actors, make each new turn another occasion for unfettered imagination." Devin Coggin from Entertainment Weekly gave the film B, 67-100, with describing the film chooses style over substance, emphasizing how cool the children's powers are without fleshing them out as full characters. To compete with Burton's best, his heroic weirdos need a little more heart, and the monsters need sharper teeth. Richard Roper, who scored the film 1.5 stars out of 4, began his review by writing, "I'm wondering if the mutant kids at Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children ever play basketball against their rivals across the pond, Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters? I'd watch that. I'd certainly rather watch that than Tim Burton's adaptation of the popular children's book about a school for freakishly gifted children. This is a messy, confusing, uninvolving mishmash of old-school practical effects and CGI battles that feels off nearly every misstep of the way." Tom Huddleston of Time Out gave the film 2 stars out of 5, writing, "Director Tim Burton likes his films busy. Watch a classic like Beetlejuice or Batman, and you'll be pushed to find a single frame that isn't packed with background detail, weird creatures, ornate furnishings, and intricate costumes." The problem with his new film, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, is that the script is every bit as busy and it can get pretty confusing. Walking back to the car after a recent screening of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, my movie-savvy, nearly 7-year-old son took my hand and asked me sweetly, "Mommy, what was that about?" Well, the short answer, which probably wasn't terribly helpful to him, was, "It's X-Men meets Groundhog Day." The real answer, which required a lot of stumbling and bumbling and twists and turns, was far more lengthy, and probably not terribly helpful either. Because even though I'd just seen the exact same movie my son had, I wasn't sure I completely understood it either. The latest adventure from Tim Burton would seem tailor-made for his tastes, but it's a convoluted slog, dense in mythology and explanatory dialogue, but woefully lacking in thrills. It's been a matter of diminishing returns with Burton for the past several years now, between Alice in Wonderland, Dark Shadows, and Big Eyes, although the animated Frankenweenie found the director in peak retro form. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children allows him to show only brief glimmers of the gleefully twisted greatness of his early work, such as Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Beetlejuice. The characters here are supposed to be delightful, or at least interesting, simply because they're superficially odd, and it just isn't enough anymore. Too often, it feels like we've seen this movie before, and seen it done better. Although the film, based on the novel by Ransom Riggs, is populated by an assortment of peculiars, as they're known, kids born with unusual abilities that make it difficult for them to live in the outside world. Precious few of them feel like actual human beings whose lonely plight might carry some emotional resonance. There's Emma, Ella Purnell, the pretty blonde who has to wear lead shoes so she doesn't fly away. There's Olive, Lauren McCrosty, the redhead who has to wear gloves so she doesn't accidentally set things on fire. There's the girl with a ravenous maw hidden on the back of her head. The invisible boy who likes to play tricks. The girl who can make things grow super fast. The boy who can project images through his eyeball. The creepy, masked twins. They flit in and out, do the thing they do, and ta-da! Then they're gone without leaving much impact. Their leader is the stylish and formidable Miss Alma LaFay, Peregrine, played by Eva Green, who nearly saves the day simply by showing up with that vampy, riveting screen presence of hers. With a shocking swoop of midnight blue hair and an array of gorgeous gowns from frequent Burton costume designer Colleen Atwood, she has the ability to manipulate time and turn into a bird, which seems unrelated. But that isn't enough. She also has to be extra quirky by smoking a pipe, and the seemingly regular kid who stumbles upon all these freaks and geeks is the incredibly boring Jake, played by Hugo star Asa Butterfield. He's our wide-eyed conduit, so of course he has to function as the straight man in such a wildly fanciful world. But there's just nothing to him, and the young British actor's American accent seems to flatten him further. You may have noticed I haven't tried to describe the plot yet. Yes, I am procrastinating. Shy? Teenage Jake lives in a bland tract house in suburban Florida, on the same street as Edward Scissorhands, possibly. He dreams of being an explorer, he says, but he would seem to lack the requisite get up and go. All his life, he's heard his beloved grandfather, Terence Stamp, who departs far too quickly, tell him outlandish stories about his own youth on an island off the coast of Wales, where he grew up at an orphanage for misfits with magical powers. After Grandpa dies under mysterious circumstances, Jake convinces his parents, Chris O'Dowd and a frustratingly underused Kim Dickens, with the help of his grief counselor, Allison Janney, that he should visit the island and try to find this mysterious home in hopes of achieving closure. Dad tags along to take photographs of birds and drink beer at the pub full of crotchety locals. Cinematographer Bruno Delbonnel, whose work includes the Coen brothers' luscious Inside Llewyn Davis, does make the foggy Welsh setting look severe and dramatic. When Jake finally does find the stately Gothic home his grandfather had told him about, he discovers it's in ruins, the result of a bombing decades earlier during World War II. But once he steps inside and begins investigating, the inhabitants dare to pop their heads out and the place comes colorfully to life. Seems they're stuck in a time loop, doomed to repeat the same day in September 1943, right up until the moment the Nazi bomb fell on them. The time-conscious Miss Peregrine explains that she winds the clock back 24 hours at the end of each night, just before the moment of destruction, allowing everyone to relive that day all over again. Doesn't that sound fun? Are you still paying attention? Anyway, for some reason, all the kids want Jake to stick around, ostensibly because they haven't seen a fresh face in about 70 years, and his will do. But they're all in danger, you see, because just as there are good mutants in the X-Men world, there are also bad ones. Here, they're the peculiars who use their powers to take over other time loops or something, and they way to stay alive is by eating people's eyeballs or something. Their leader is the courtly yet menacing Mr. Barron, whom Samuel L. Jackson plays with the kind of scenery chewing he could do in his sleep. But what they want is never clear, so they're never truly frightening. The supposedly epic collision between good and evil results in exactly one exciting action set piece. It involves stop-motion animated skeletons battling an army of long-limbed, eye-gouging mercenary giants at a boardwalk amusement park. And it's the only scene that vividly recalls the kind of artistry and absurd humor that long have been Burton's trademarks. And the peculiar who makes it all happen has the most useful and the most ethically intriguing ability of all. Enoch, Finlay Macmillan, can bring things back to life. A person, a creepy doll, by inserting a beating heart into it. Unfortunately, though, he ends up being just another cog in the particularly dull machinery, Miss Peregrine's home. For Peculiar Children Review, filmgoers have endured such a punishing onslaught of young adult adaptations. It's enough to make you want to sulk and dream of escaping into some sort of fantasy realm. Think back, if you can, to recent duds like The Mortal Instruments, City of Bone, The Maze Runner, The Scorch Trials, or, Rowling help us, that second Twilight film before they wised up and added a bit of intentional camp. Survivors of this cinematic drudgery, and there ought to be support groups, have been wondering just what would happen if you took one of these wholly-by-the-numbers affairs and hired a director who at least had a little bit of style. With Tim Burton behind the camera, and the always sharp screenwriter Jane Goldman keeping him on course, we have our answer in Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. The source material is a whopper of an elevator pitch, X-Men done up all British and gloomy and gothic. If Winona Ryder's Lydia Dietz from Beetlejuice read comics when she was 13, they'd have been something like this. To add additional spin, our young English mutants are caught up in a Groundhog Day of their own creation, so we get the playfulness of seeing quirky magic powers mixed with the familiarity of how a time loop plays out. Add in Burton's authorial visual stamp, and what we've got is an extremely pleasing formula. It gels as Tim Burton's best, non-musical, live-action movie for 20 years. That's a lot of modifiers for a compliment. But I do want to manage expectations. The plot is extremely predictable, and the third act's action set pieces, even with a loving homage to Ray Harryhausen, seems to go on forever. Asa Butterfield is quite good as Jake, a nervous dreamer whose voice couldn't get any lower if it were in his shoes. Out of place in the tacky palm tree-dotted Florida, Burton's aesthetic has always mixed in Pink Flamingo camp with Hammer Films castles. Jake follows the maps left behind by his dead grandfather Abe, Terence Stamp, a Polish refugee who spent the war at the domicile referenced in the film's title, run by Eva Green, who smokes a pipe and looks as if she's just heard a joke she mustn't share. The home, on a small island off the coast of Wales, is a safe haven for kids with strange abilities. Some are more standard superhero than others. Would you like the ability to be invisible or to manipulate air? Or would you like to have bees living in your mouth or the capacity to grow root vegetables with tremendous speed? Jake, with his dad, the always wonderful Chris O'Dowd, visit the island at the suggestion of Jake's therapist, Allison Janney, and it's there that he's able to enter Miss Peregrine's hidden time loop. Some of the film's rules are definitely of the I'm not going to put too much mental energy to make sure this all checks out, but I will say there are some innovative uses of time travel. Less interesting is the motivation of the baddies. Yes, there are baddies who want to kill Miss Peregrine for some reason. The creatures, all tentacles and teeth, look tremendous, and Samuel L. Jackson, perhaps on a dare from Christopher Walken, chomps up the scenery in glorious fashion. It is unfortunate in 2016 that the only person of color is the bad guy, but at least this is the type of bad guy that the movie is not that secretly cheering on. He eats a giant bowl of children's eyeballs. In Tim Burton's world, that practically makes him a hero. There are additional books in the series, but I hope they never make it to film. This movie ends on a lovely note. It's high time Tim Burton visited a pier in Blackpool, and the kids are all at the age where this won't seem as cute 2 years from now. Moreover, the important themes, one of sanctuary and growth, are nicely, but not overly developed in this singular entry. Not every film needs to grow into a franchise. Sometimes it's best to let things live in their own isolated world. The title may read, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, but there can be no doubt for anyone buying a ticket, this is really Tim Burton's Home for Peculiar Children. Not since Sweeney Todd, and before that all the way back to Sleepy Hollow, have the studios found such a perfect match of material for Hollywood's most iconic auteur. It's gotten to the point where the mere addition of Burton's name to a movie title can justify an otherwise iffy prospect. You don't want to see a Planet of the Apes remake? Well, how about a Tim Burton Planet of the Apes remake? Now you're interested. Here, there's nothing forced about the coupling of Ransom Riggs's surprise bestseller with Burton's playfully non-threatening goth aesthetic and outsider sensibility, which should put the director back on the blockbuster charts. One of the kid-lit sphere's freshest recent surprises, Riggs's novel was inspired by the author's personal collection of vintage photographs, including a floating girl, an invisible boy, and other such dark-room dodges, not unlike retouch artist Mark Mothersbaugh's Beautiful Mutants series, and may as well have been written for Burton to direct. Known as Peculiars, this eccentric mix of wartime refugees are like a cross between the Addams Family and the X-Men, each one blessed with some outre ability, from spontaneously igniting anything they touch to bringing inanimate objects, i.e., skeletons and dolls, to life. While collateral damage from a Nazi bombing destroyed their beautiful Victorian orphanage during World War II, these kids have had few direct enemies, tucked away on the tiny Welsh island of Cairnholm for more than 7 decades. But that's changed now that a shape-shifting goon named Baron, Samuel L. Jackson, is on the hunt for peculiars, gobbling their eyes with great relish. And no one plays great relish, eye-gobbling or otherwise, like Jackson. The kids have been safe all this time thanks to Miss Peregrine, embodied by Burton's new muse, Eva Green, who possesses the gift of creating protective loops, or 24-hour safety bubbles, wherein her charges can hide in a Groundhog Day-like cycle, forever repeating the day before the bomb struck. As guardians go, Miss Peregrine is what one might call an imbrine, a rare breed of peculiar capable of transforming into a bird. In her case, a peregrine falcon, though there are others, including Miss Avocet, played by Judi Dench. Her ebony hair streaked with blue and swept up into a bird's nest. Green cleverly suggests her avian alter ego, standing rigidly upright in her peacock blue satin gown, glowering down through exaggerated eyeliner, and brandishing her long, slender fingers as if they were talons. Riggs may have imagined her, but she has clearly become a Burton creation, just one of many among her brood of adolescent oddities, who might otherwise be mistaken for so many sideshow freaks. While hardly as elaborate or inventive as Hogwarts, Miss Peregrine's eccentric quasi-orphanage shares the quality of remaining a well-kept secret from polite society. Even the other Cairnholm residents don't realize who their neighbors are, so none can imagine why a boy named Jacob Portman, Asa Butterfield, who has literally grown up, if not necessarily into those endearingly big ears of his, since starring in Martin Scorsese's Hugo, would travel all the way from Florida to visit what remains of the old house. An aspiring discoverer, Jacob is reeling from the murder of his paranoid old grandfather, Abe Terrence Stamp, who died trying to defend himself from a long-limbed, eyeball-snatching creature called a hologast. Of all the film's design improvements, the hologast represents its most inspired, looking like a malicious, tentacle-mouthed twist on The Nightmare Before Christmas Pumpkin King Jack Skellington. No one quite believes Jacob's first-hand account, though he cleverly manipulates his therapist, a hilariously understanding Alison Janney, into endorsing the trip to Wales, on the condition that his washed-up dad, Chris O'Dowd, accompanies him. In the grand tradition of kid heroes who must circumvent their fuddy-duddy parents in order to accomplish great feats, Jacob manages to ditch his dad and locate Miss Peregrine's loop, stepping back into 1943 to meet the children who had once been Abe's closest companions. Some traits are undeniably genetic, and Jacob has inherited both his grandfather's peculiarity and his taste in women. In fact, given the time travel conceit, Jacob has the unique opportunity to swoon for the very same girl that Abe had loved so many years ago, a borderline albino blonde bombshell named Ella Purnell, for whom screenwriter Jane Goldman, Stardust, has devised some deliciously romantic interactions, including a splendid reverse Tin Anku Andeberg Titanic love scene that sets up several key elements of the film's finale, including a skeleton battle to rival the imagination of Ray Harryhausen. Goldman's frequently amusing script is the secret ingredient that makes Miss Peregrine such an appropriate fit for Burton's peculiar sensibility, allowing the director to revisit and expand motifs and themes from his earlier work. With its time-skipping chronology and family-reconciling framing device, the entire tale could be another of Burton's big fish stories from the film of the same name. It offers opportunities for Frankenweenie-style stop-motion. There are ostracized freaks and even a dino-shaped topiary straight out of Edward Scissorhands, and its elaborate, meticulously decorated mansion manages to improve upon the wonky houses seen in Beetlejuice and Dark Shadows. Perhaps it's all a little bit too familiar for those who've been following Burton since the beginning. Although the director repeats more than he innovates this time around, for younger audiences, the film makes a terrific introduction to his blue-hued, forever Halloween aesthetic. It's clearly also an excuse for him to work with green again after Dark Shadows, and rather than leaving audiences with the icky feeling that he's twisting his leading lady to fit his admittedly kooky sensibility, as seemed to happen with Helena Bonham Carter and Lisa Marie, he appears to have met his match in green. The already outré, penny dreadful star walks that razor-fine line between dignity and camp, perhaps better than any other current actress, making for a partnership we can only hope to see continue. I have wanted the underrated 2010's fantasy movie, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, to get a sequel for 9 years, but I am finally admitting it will not happen. Released in 2016, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children is based on a 2011 novel of the same name by Ransom Riggs and follows teenager Jake Portman, Asa Butterfield, who uncovers a mystery that spans throughout time, finding himself in Miss Peregrine's home for peculiar children. The Peculiars each have different powers and live inside a time-looped house set for September 3rd, 1943, which keeps their existence a secret. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children was directed by Tim Burton and grossed $296.5 million at the box office worldwide, doubling its production budget of $110 million. Yet, despite its box office success and Burton's notoriety, the fantasy movie has not released a sequel in the 9 years since. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children received mixed reviews from critics due to its flimsy plot, especially considering the amount of lore the original book offered. However, the film is far from Tim Burton's worst movie, and I have long believed that Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children deserves a sequel. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children certainly deserves a sequel, despite its lukewarm reception, because Ransom Riggs's fantasy universe has much more to offer. Following the movie's opening weekend in 2016, Fox's chief of domestic distribution, Chris Aronson, spoke to Variety about the possibility of a sequel, stating that, "It's a promising start, but it's too early to tell. There are multiple books, and they are bestsellers, so the door is open. The fact that there is so much literary content available to adapt into a movie proved promising for a potential Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children sequel. One of the main criticisms of the 2016 movie was its approach to the lore. Tim Burton has always been brilliant at creating visually spectacular movies, but critics felt that Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children fell flat in its story, especially considering how fantastic the books are. This can be felt in the film, as Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children seems to focus more on its visuals than constructing a compelling narrative that makes you want more films. Consequently, I think the fantasy movie deserves a sequel in order to rectify this, including more of the book's lore. Unfortunately, the box office result for Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children was not as impressive as Hollywood would have liked, as the industry tends to expect movies to make a profit of more than double its budget. The 2016 movie only just managed to break even with its box office result, so this, alongside its general criticisms, meant that a sequel was unlikely immediately following its release. However, it is still strange that Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children 2 never happened at all, considering how the Tim Burton film has somehow held up even 9 years later. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children has become a staple 2010s fantasy movie, and this is evident in the movie's impressive popularity on Netflix, nearly a decade since its release. Usually, the length of time between movies would deter the release of a sequel, as it's been so long since the first film. However, a sequel shouldn't be a problem for director Tim Burton, considering his Beetlejuice movie was released a staggering 36 years after Beetlejuice, yet still managed to perform well at the box office. Yet, a Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children sequel still feels unlikely. Dark fantasy movies like itself and Alice in Wonderland were at the height of popularity in the 2010s, and current genre trends mean that a sequel released now wouldn't do as well. Therefore, it has been suggested that the only potential way for Burton's fantasy movie to be successful in the 2020s is through something like a Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children reboot TV show. In fact, a modern TV series revitalization would improve on the original film, allowing time for the amount of exploration in the best-selling books. Unfortunately, there are no current plans for such a project. Considering there is a sequel book, we can take a good guess as to what Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children 2 would be about. Released in 2014, Hollow City is set directly after the events of the first book and follows Jacob and his friends fleeing from Miss Peregrine's home to the peculiar capital of the world, London. The book-to-movie adaptation would likely have explored the same story, with Jacob and his friends finding another time loop and learning of Miss Wren, another Imbrine, who they track down to potentially help Miss Peregrine turn back into a human. Interestingly, 20th Century Fox, the distributors of the 2016 movie, were originally so eager to adapt Ransom Riggs' first novel that they actually bought the rights to the book before it was even published. Therefore, a potential Hollow City sequel to Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children would have been next on the cards. However, due to its average box office earnings and the criticism of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children's rushed plot, Fox ultimately decided not to follow through with what could have been a brilliant fantasy franchise in the 2010s, led by the notorious Tim Burton. They're not just random elements. They're all tied together, working in harmony to build a world that's as layered and complex as the characters themselves. It's these small touches, these hidden details that make Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children so much more than just a fantasy adventure. It's a story about finding your place in the world, understanding the weight of history, and most importantly, learning that even the strangest parts of ourselves have a place in the larger story. So, next time you watch, keep an eye out for these hidden gems. You might just see something new that makes the story even more meaningful. First off, let's talk about the casting process because there were a few surprise twists in there. Asa Butterfield, who plays Jake, was actually not the first choice for the role. Tim Burton had originally wanted someone else for the part, but when Asa came in to audition, he had a kind of natural vulnerability that won Burton over. They say Burton was looking for someone who could capture Jake's journey, someone who could go from being this unsure, grieving teen to a confident hero. Asa had that perfect balance, and it wasn't just the acting. Burton apparently saw something in Asa's look, something almost timeless. It's a little bit eerie, actually, because Asa's face has this almost classic feel to it, making him look like he could fit into any time period. It makes sense when you think about how the film plays with time loops, right? The idea of the past constantly overlapping with the present. But yeah, originally Asa wasn't even on the radar for the role, and now he's become Jake in the minds of everyone who's seen the movie. Now, here's a fun little tidbit. Miss Peregrine herself, Eva Green, actually almost didn't get the part either. Can you imagine anyone else playing the role? But at one point, there were other actresses in the running for the role, and Eva wasn't Burton's first choice. It's a bit crazy because once she stepped into the role, she basically became Miss Peregrine. Burton and the producers just knew she was perfect for the part. Even though it didn't seem like a done deal at first, what really helped Eva land the role was her understanding of the character's duality. This strong, almost mystical protector side combined with the more vulnerable human side of Miss Peregrine. Eva's performance really brought that complexity to life. I mean, when you think of Miss Peregrine now, you can't help but picture Eva Green's icy elegance mixed with that motherly warmth. But here's where it gets interesting. Eva Green, who is known for her deep, intense acting style, actually almost didn't agree to some of the quirkier parts of her character. At first, she wasn't totally on board with some of the more whimsical elements of Miss Peregrine's personality. You know, the part where she turns into a bird and all that. It wasn't exactly Eva's cup of tea, but she trusted Tim Burton, and he convinced her to just dive into the weirdness. I mean, it's Tim Burton. How could you say no, right? Turns out, Eva had a blast with it, and you can definitely see it in her performance. The way she walks that line between being regal and tough, while still managing to be kind and protective, it's just perfect. But if you think that was the weirdest casting choice, buckle up. Samuel L. Jackson, who plays Baron, almost didn't get to be the villain. At first, Tim Burton had a different vision for Baron entirely. Can you imagine this movie without Samuel L. Jackson's manic energy? But the truth is, Burton and the studio were unsure about his casting because they were looking for someone less known. They wanted an actor who could be scary, but also add some quirky humor. And Jackson was a bit too famous for their tastes at first. But of course, once Burton sat down with him, he realized that Jackson's deep, commanding voice and his sense of unpredictability would be a perfect match for Baron. Jackson brought this mix of charm and danger to Baron, turning what could have been a generic villain into a character who is so unsettling and lay. Jackson even added his own flavor to the role, improvising several of his lines. It's these off-the-cuff moments that make Baron memorable. Speaking of improvisation, did you know that some of the film's most iconic scenes were completely unscripted? One of the coolest moments in the movie happens during the sequence with the invisible boy, Millard. There's a scene where Jake is walking through the house, and Millard's voice is coming from different parts of the room. The crew originally had planned for a static shot where Jake just stands still, but the actors playing the peculiar children got a little more creative. They started improvising by hiding around the set and using their voices to make the moment feel more immersive. That wasn't in the script at all. It added this layer of spontaneity that made the house feel even more alive and magical, like you're stepping into a world where anything can happen. Little things like this are what made the entire movie feel so alive, so organic. Now, let's talk about the set design, because it's absolutely bonkers in the best way. The production design team went all out, and I mean all out. The set for Miss Peregrine's home is filled with hundreds of small details that most people won't even notice. For instance, did you catch the puzzle pieces in the living room? It's not just a random design choice, it's a deliberate visual nod to the story's theme of fitting the pieces of a mystery together. Every room in that house was crafted to feel both ancient and timeless, with little oddities tucked into every corner. Some of the furniture, for example, was built to look as if it could have belonged to someone from the 1940s, but it's made with modern materials, just like the time loop itself, where the past and present collide. The design team really captured that feeling of being stuck in time, and it's not just through the architecture. They also played with shadows, light, and colors in a way that heightens the mystery and the exterior of Miss Peregrine's home. That was a bit of a challenge. Burton was so committed to making everything just right that they ended up building the house as a giant model. You heard that right, a model. For certain shots, the crew actually filmed a miniature version of the house, which was then digitally enhanced to look like the real thing. This is something Burton's done before in films like Batman and Beetlejuice, but it's not something you see all the time in today's CGI-heavy world. It was a huge technical challenge, but it's part of what makes the movie feel like a living, breathing fantasy. The fact that the house was built as a miniature was also a way of tying into the whole theme of being trapped. The house itself feels like a dollhouse, as if the characters are living in a world that's being controlled by the whims of fate. This was a conscious choice by Burton, who's always been interested in using visual metaphors to explore his characters' emotional journeys. The miniatures didn't just serve the movie's aesthetics, they were part of the story itself. Now, here's something really surprising. The movie's creatures weren't always as creepy as they turned out. Baron's final form, the grotesque, monstrous creature with hollow eyes, actually went through several design changes. Early on, the special effects team created a completely different version of Baron, but the team found it too alien in appearance, too far removed from the movie's emotional tone. So they made a last-minute switch, opting for something that felt more grounded in the idea of decay and corruption. That's how we ended up with Baron's final design, which is both eerie and just enough human to make him truly unsettling. It's funny to think that something as basic as designing a monster could have totally changed the vibe of the film, but that's the magic of movie making. Every decision, even the smallest one, has a ripple effect. One of the wildest things behind the scenes was the pyrotechniques used for the fire scenes. You know, the ones where Olive creates flames with her hands. Well, those weren't CGI. The fire you see is real, and not just any kind of fire. This was controlled, high-intensity stunt fire. The special effects crew had to take extreme precautions while filming those scenes, ensuring that everything was completely safe while still making it look as dramatic as possible. There were moments when the crew would be literally from 10F flames, all while trying to capture the perfect shot. It was dangerous work, but the result is a set of visuals that feel truly organic, giving the film a level of raw intensity that you can't always replicate with CGI. All of these moments, the casting surprises, the set, tricks, the last-minute changes are a testament to just how weird and magical Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children really is. It's a film that, like the children in the story, doesn't quite fit into a single category. And maybe that's why it stands out so much. From the casting mishaps to the odd design choices, everything about the movie's creation seems as peculiar as the world it brings to life. The fact that there were so many twists and turns in the making of the film just goes to show how much work, love, both emotionally and thematically. There's something about the way Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children weaves its fantastical elements with deeper, more universal ideas about family, belonging, and facing your past that makes these moments stick with you long after the credits roll. One of the first scenes that really stands out for me is when Jake first steps into Miss Peregrine's home and meets the peculiar children. It's one of those scenes where everything shifts and you start to feel like something magical is about to happen. But it's more than just the visuals of the house or the oddness of the children themselves. It's the moment Jake realizes he's not just stumbled into a strange place. He stumbled into a family, a place where people who don't fit into the outside world have found a way to belong. There's an underlying sadness in that scene, especially when Jake looks at the peculiar children and begins to understand just how long they've been living in this time loop, stuck in 1943. Day after day, Miss Peregrine has been protecting them for years, but they are still in a kind of prison. Their peculiarities, which should be their greatest gift, have isolated them from the rest of the world. There's this sense that despite the wonder of their powers, they've been robbed of a normal life, and it hits you in the gut. As Jake begins to understand their struggles, you can see how much he yearns for that same sense of belonging, but also how deeply he sympathizes with them. It's an emotional turning point for Jake, and it sets the stage for everything that follows. His journey isn't just about discovering the truth about his grandfather's past. It's about finding where he belongs in a world that doesn't seem to have a place for him. This moment, where he's faced with the children and their strange reality, is what starts that search. Another powerful moment is when Jake realizes that his grandfather, Abraham Portman, wasn't just a peculiar man, but someone who was deeply connected to the peculiar children. We all know that the big reveal is coming, that Jake himself is peculiar, but when the pieces begin to fit together, it's hard not to get drawn into the gravity of it. This is where the film does something clever with its emotional and narrative pacing. The reveal isn't just about Jake finding out about his powers. It's about him realizing that his connection to these peculiar children is far deeper than he ever imagined. He's not just an outsider observing their world, his part of it. The weight of that moment hits differently when you think about Jake's past. He's always felt a little bit lost, unsure of who he really is. To suddenly realize that you're part of a world you didn't even know existed, and that your entire life has been shaped by it in ways you didn't understand is a lot to take in. It's a huge shift in his identity. And in that moment, you can see Jake making the decision to embrace his peculiarity, not just as a way to connect with the children, but as a way to connect with himself. But the real emotional punch comes later when Jake and the peculiar children have to face Baron and his army of hollows. One of the most significant scenes in this part of the film happens when Miss Peregrine is captured and transformed into a bird by Baron. It's devastating, not just because of the physical transformation, but because it marks a moment when the children's protector, their safe haven, is taken away from them. Miss Peregrine is the one who's always kept them safe, the one who has shielded them from the horrors of the outside world. Without her, they are vulnerable, and the children are faced with a terrifying uncertainty. It's a turning point where the story shifts from being about discovery and wonder to a fight for survival. But there's something even deeper at play here. Miss Peregrine's transformation also symbolizes the idea of sacrifice. She's always been the protector, the one who shields the children from harm. But in this moment, we see that she's willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to keep them safe, even if it means losing herself in the process. It's not just about the action or the danger. This moment carries the weight of everything Miss Peregrine represents to the children. She's their guide, their protector, and their anchor to the world they've come to know. When she's taken, it's like the foundation of their world has been ripped out from under them. It's a moment of deep, emotional loss, and it makes the stakes feel so much higher. There's also an interesting parallel between Miss Peregrine's capture and Jake's journey. Just as Miss Peregrine is stripped of her powers, Jake has to step up and take responsibility for the children's safety. It's a full-circle moment for Jake, who started out as an unsure teenager, only to realize that in this strange, peculiar world, he's the one who needs to save the day. Which brings me to another key scene, Jake's confrontation with Baron. At this point in the movie, Jake has gone from being an observer to someone who truly understands his place in this world. The fight is intense, but it's also deeply personal. Baron as a villain is not just someone who wants to destroy the children's world for power. He's a reflection of the darkness that lives within every one of us. He's a reminder of how easy it is to let fear and obsession consume you, to become something monstrous because of your own insecurities. Baron's manipulation of the children, especially the way he uses their vulnerabilities against them, speaks to a larger theme in the film. The way our greatest strengths can sometimes become our greatest weaknesses. Jake's victory over Baron, then, is not just a triumph of good versus evil. It's the moment when Jake truly steps into his own. He's finally made peace with his peculiarities and understands that they're not a curse. They're a part of who he is. This is the moment where Jake becomes a true protector, someone who is willing to fight for those who don't have the ability to fight for themselves. And when Miss Peregrine is restored to her human form, there's a sense of relief, but also a feeling of completion. Jake has done what needed to be done. He's no longer the lost teenager searching for answers. He's become a part of the peculiar family, and the story comes full circle. But what makes these scenes so powerful isn't just the action, it's the emotional undercurrent that flows through each moment. The real heart of the film is about acceptance, accepting yourself, accepting your past, and accepting the people around you. From Jake's discovery of his peculiar nature to his decision to fight for the children, the film is constantly exploring the tension between belonging and isolation. The peculiar children are isolated by their powers, yet their bond with each other creates a sense of family. In many ways, they are all outsiders, but together they form a unit that supports and protects each other. And for Jake, it's a reminder that even though he struggled to find his place in the world, he's always had a family waiting for him, one that's been hidden just beneath the surface of his reality. One of the quieter but equally powerful moments happens near the end when Jake takes his place among the peculiar children. It's not a dramatic fight or a huge revelation. It's just him accepting his role in this strange world. When Miss Peregrine looks at him with pride, it's clear that Jake has found something he never thought he would: his purpose. And that's what makes this film so impactful. It's not just about the peculiar powers or the magical world. It's about the search for connection, for family, and for finding your place in a world that doesn't always make sense. That's why the film's emotional core resonates so deeply. It's a story about finding yourself even in the most unexpected of places. So, these key moments woven together reveal how deeply personal Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children really is. It's a film about the importance of community, the need for self-acceptance, and the power of facing your fears and flaws. It's not just about battling evil or discovering hidden powers. It's about discovering who you are in the process. And that's what makes these scenes so powerful. They are not just pivotal plot points. They're the emotional milestones of a character who has come to realize his true potential. Making this movie was a bit like stepping into a weird dream where magic, strange creatures, and hidden worlds come to life. And it didn't happen by accident. The people behind the movie, from the actors to the crew, worked hard to bring this quirky world to life. Let's take a look at some of the cool tricks and challenges that made the movie what it is. First, let's talk about the house. Miss Peregrine's home, where all the peculiar children live, is an important part of the story. It's not just any house, it's a mix of mysterious and cozy. The house needed to look real, but also like it was stuck in time. But here's the thing. The house wasn't actually a real building. It was a set built by the filmmakers in a studio. They made it look old and magical with dusty corners, old books, and mysterious things in every room. When the actors walked through it, it felt like they were really there, and the house became its own character in the film. But here's the clever part. The house also looked like it was frozen in time, like everything inside was stuck in the past, just like the peculiar children. They were all living in a loop, stuck in the same day, and the house reflected that, like it was a snapshot of history. It wasn't just about the visuals. The design helped tell the story, showing how the children lived in a world that didn't move forward. Every little detail added to that feeling, like how the house felt warm, but also like it was holding on to memories. Now, let's talk about the peculiar children. Each child has a special ability, like Olive, who can control fire, or Millard, who is invisible. Making these powers come to life wasn't easy, but the crew had some cool tricks up their sleeves. For example, Millard, the invisible boy, was a challenge. The idea was that he would sometimes be fully invisible, but they didn't want to rely just on computer effects. Instead, they used clever camera work and some props to make Millard seem invisible. They would show parts of him, like his hands or feet, but when he wasn't in the frame, they made sure he didn't cast a shadow. The effect was simple, but worked really well. You never fully saw him, but you always knew he was there. Then there's Olive, the girl who can make fire. You might think fire in movies is all CGI, computer-made, but for Olive, they used real fire. Yep, they set up, controlled, flames that were safe, but intense. The crew made sure the fire was small enough to look believable, but big enough to feel dangerous. The cool part, Olive's actor had to act like she was controlling the fire in real time, while the flames were really going off around her. It gave the whole scene a sense of excitement, because the fire was real and you could feel that energy. But it wasn't just about the children's powers. Let's talk about the villain, Baron. He is a pretty creepy guy, and his hollow form, his monster shape, is one of the film's biggest visual effects. Baron can turn into a weird, scary creature with eyes that are hollow and a face that looks twisted. To make this monster real, they didn't just rely on computers, they used prosthetics, which are like special masks and body parts that are made to look real. Samuel L. Jackson, who played Baron, had to sit in a chair for hours while the team applied the prosthetics to his face. It was a long process, but it worked. The result, a creepy yet fascinating villain who was as much about what he wasn't showing, his empty eyes, as about what he was. When Baron transforms, you get this sense of something not quite human. It's unsettling, but also mesmerizing. Now, let's talk about how sound played a huge role. Have you ever noticed how sound can make a movie feel so much bigger? For Miss Peregrine, the the sound was important for creating the atmosphere. Think about those moments when the children are using their powers, or when something creepy is about to happen. The sound designers added a lot of little touches to make you feel the tension, the magic, or even the danger. There were subtle noises in the background that made the world feel more alive. For example, when the peculiar children are moving around in the house, you might hear soft creaks or the fluttering of wings, reminding you that something magical is always just around the corner. But beyond all that, the film's music helped set the emotional closely with Tim Burton to make sure the music matched the strange, whimsical feeling of the film. The music isn't just background noise. It reflects the emotions of the characters and the world they live in. For instance, when Jake is starting to understand who he really is, the music feels a little more uplifting. But when Baron appears or something sinister happens, the music changes to match the danger. It's a clever way of using sound to guide how you feel during each scene, making the movie more immersive. The filmmakers also worked hard to create a sense of mystery. They didn't just use CGI to make things look cool. They combined special effects with practical effects, things that were actually built or set up on set. One example is the scene where Jake's grandfather is telling him about the peculiar children for the first time. In that moment, the filmmakers used simple but effective camera angles, lighting, and small visual effects to show how mysterious the world is without overloading it with too much flash. Ken's whole point was to make you feel like you were discovering this hidden world, not just watching it unfold on screen. Another cool thing is how the filmmakers used real places to create some of the locations. For example, the scenes that were set in the UK were filmed in actual old houses, castles, and areas with real history. This gave the film a timeless feel, like it could have been shot years ago or today. By blending real locations with their imagination, they created a place that felt both familiar and strange. A home for the peculiar children that didn't quite belong to any one time. One of the most challenging parts of the movie was making sure the fantastical elements felt real. It's easy to get caught up in the magic and make everything look too perfect or computer-generated. But Tim Burton wanted the oddities to feel grounded, like they had a purpose and history. That's why the production team put so much thought into every little detail, from the way the children's powers worked to the textures of the props. They even used old film techniques to make certain scenes feel like they were part of a vintage film, adding to the idea that this was a place trapped in time. In the end, the movie's visual style, sound design, and special effects came together to make Miss Peregrine's feel like a strange, wonderful dream. Everything was planned to help tell the story in a way that felt real and magical at the same time. It wasn't just about the big moments. It was about the little details, the creaky floorboards, the fire, the hidden whispers in the background that made this world feel alive. And all of this came together because the team behind the film was willing to try new things, use practical effects when they could, and keep the magic grounded in reality. So, from the way the sets were designed to the careful use of sound and visual effects, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children was a movie that combined creativity and technology in a way that brought this peculiar world to life. And if you look closely, you can see all the effort the crew put into making the world feel real and magical. At the same time, it's not just a movie, it's an experience that pulls you into its weird, wonderful universe. The themes, symbolism, and deeper messages in Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children are more than just surface-level ideas or story elements. They are embedded in almost every corner of the film, woven seamlessly into the characters, the plot, and even the world they live in. Tim Burton known for his quirky, dark, and whimsical style, used this film to explore ideas about difference, belonging, the passing of time, and the hidden strength found in imperfection. As you start peeling back the layers, the movie becomes a mirror, reflecting not only the peculiar world these children inhabit, but also the challenges many of us face in our own world. One of the first ideas that stands out is the notion of being different. From the moment we meet Jake, the protagonist, we see that he doesn't quite fit into the world around him. He's different, but in a way that's hard to pinpoint. His family doesn't understand him, and he struggles with a sense of isolation. When he stumbles upon Miss Peregrine's home and meets the peculiar children, he discovers a place where difference isn't just accepted, it's celebrated. Every child in Miss Peregrine's care has a unique power, something that makes them peculiar in a world that often wants to hide or change. What's different? The story becomes a celebration of individuality, showing that being unique doesn't have to be a burden. In fact, it's often the thing that makes someone special. Olive can control fire. Millard is invisible. Emma has the power of air. Each child's peculiarity, no matter how odd, becomes a strength in a world that doesn't always value the unusual. This leads into the theme of belonging. It's a universal feeling, the need to find a place where we truly belong. For Jake, this journey is physical and emotional. He starts in a world where he doesn't feel like he fits in. But by the time he meets the peculiar children and learns about their shared existence in the time loop, he finds a group of people who understand him. There's an overwhelming sense of community and acceptance in Miss Peregrine's home. These children may live in a loop stuck in the same day, but they also part of something bigger than themselves. Their lives may be frozen in time, but the bond they share is real and powerful. It's a reminder that the people we choose to surround ourselves with, the ones who accept us for who we truly are what make us feel whole. At the heart of the movie is the concept of time, how it can be a force for both healing and destruction. The children live in a loop, repeating the same day over and over again, which may sound like an ideal way to avoid the troubles of the outside world. But as the story progresses, we realize that this time loop is both a blessing and a curse. The children are stuck in a kind of stasis, never able to grow or experience life beyond the same day. It raises questions about what it means to live in the present, to move forward in life, and the importance of embracing change. Time in this film is symbolic of both the potential for growth and the fear of moving on. Jake's journey is about breaking free from the loops that keep him stagnant and learning to live a fuller, more meaningful life. In the same way, Miss Peregrine's time loop is a way of holding on to the past, preserving something valuable, but ultimately the characters must decide whether they can remain trapped or if they will embrace change. Another layer of symbolism is seen in the hologusts, the monsters that hunt the peculiar children. They are a representation of fear and loss. They are not just terrifying creatures. They are remnants of people who have abandoned their humanity in search of power. Much like the villain Baron, hologusts are people who have consumed too much, lost themselves in the process, and now exist in a monstrous empty state. They are a symbol of the dangers of obsession, whether it's an obsession with immortality, power, or even trying to preserve something forever. Baron's transformation into a holist is a warning against letting one's desires consume them. It's a tragic story of someone who, in his search for eternal life, loses everything that makes them human, and in the end, becomes nothing more than an empty shell. The hologs remind us that trying to hold on to the past or trying to live forever comes at a great cost. As we dive deeper into the visuals of the film, the symbols are all around us. The house, for example, is not just a place. It's a symbol of safety, protection, and confinement all at once. It's a sanctuary for the children, a place where they are safe from the outside world, but it also represents the dangers of isolation. It's a space that keeps them stuck in time, preventing them from growing or experiencing the full breadth of life. In many ways, it mirrors Jake's own struggle, how he's held back by his grief, his doubts, and the memory of his grandfather. The house offers protection, but at the cost of freedom. The birds often seen in the background of shots, or represented in Miss Peregrine herself as she can turn into a bird, are another symbol. Birds represent freedom, flight, and escape. Ideas that are central to the film, but they also symbolize transformation. Miss Peregrine is a protector, but she also embodies the idea of letting go and moving forward. Her ability to transform into a bird shows her power, but also her ability to navigate between different worlds and times. She is in a sense a guide for Jake, showing him that he too must embrace the changes that come with growing up and moving forward. Finally, let's not forget about the children themselves. Each child's power is a metaphor for something deeper. Olive's fire, for instance, could represent the uncontrollable nature of passion, while Emma's powers could symbolize freedom and independence. The children's powers often speak to the struggles and strengths that come with being different, with being othered by society, but they also show that these differences can become sources of strength when used with purpose. In a way, their powers serve as a metaphor for the different parts of us that we might try to hide, the parts that make us feel different, but also make us who we are. Now, on to the cast chemistry, behind-the-scenes moments, and the audience's reaction to Miss Peregrine's. When you're making a movie like this, with all its magic, special effects, and quirky characters, the chemistry between the cast becomes even more important. It's not just about how well they act in front of the camera, but how they work together off-screen too. From the very start, you could feel the connection between Eva Green, who played Miss Peregrine, and Asa Butterfield, who played Jake. Their relationship on screen is vital to the movie's emotional core. Miss Peregrine is a motherly figure to Jake and the other children, and Eva Green's portrayal of her is both warm and mysterious. She brings a sense of strength and tenderness to the role, which balances perfectly with Asa's portrayal of Jake. His character's vulnerability and curiosity are what make the two of them such a great team. In interviews, Asa mentioned how Eva would often help him prepare for emotionally tough scenes, providing a sense of support even off camera. But it wasn't just the main leads. The supporting cast, especially the peculiar children, brought so much energy to the set. Each actor seemed to embody their character's unique traits with such ease. You could tell they had a blast working together, and that energy is what helped make their interactions so natural. From Samuel L. Jackson's serious yet menacing performance as Baron to Ella Purnell's graceful portrayal of Emma, everyone seemed to fit perfectly into their roles. There's a certain joy in seeing actors who clearly get along and understand the material. They make it look effortless, even when the scenes are tricky. Behind the scenes, the actors had a lot of fun, too. They'd often talk about how surreal it was to film in such a fantastical setting, surrounded by strange props and creatures. It wasn't all serious work. The peculiar children would joke around with one another between takes, and some of those moments made it into the final film, giving it a sense of warmth and genuine friendship. The playful dynamic between the children, who were constantly on the move and learning about their powers, made for a fun and relaxed atmosphere on set. As for the audience, reactions were mixed at first. Some people loved the weird, whimsical tone, the dark Burton-esque atmosphere, and the fantastic characters. Others weren't as sure. It was definitely a movie that attracted fans of Burton's work who were drawn to its oddities and visual style. The movie did well, but it also left some viewers wondering if they had fully understood the story or if they felt connected to the characters. Overall, Miss Peregrine gained a solid following, particularly among those who appreciated its blend of fantasy, adventure, and heartfelt emotion. Many viewers found themselves thinking about it long after they'd left the theater, discussing the meaning behind the peculiar children's powers or diving into the deeper themes about belonging and time. And for those who embraced it, Miss Peregrine's was a reminder of how important it is to find your place in the world, to accept your unique traits, and to embrace the journey of life, no matter how peculiar it might be. Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children isn't just another fantastical adventure. It's a movie that sticks with you, and not because of its stunning visuals or quirky characters alone. It lingers because it explores deeper ideas about belonging, individuality, and the power of transformation. At first glance, it might seem like a whimsical story about kids with strange powers living in a magical house. But when you dig deeper, you realize it's a reflection of how we all struggle to find our place in the world, how we navigate our differences, and how we eventually come to understand that our imperfections are what make us powerful. Tim Burton took us on a ride through a peculiar world, blending lighthearted adventure with dark, meaningful themes. From the magical house that feels stuck in time to the peculiar children who each have their own story of struggle and survival, every detail in this film has a purpose. It's not just about the oddities or the special powers. It's about how those things shape who we are, how they make us feel seen and accepted, or how they sometimes cause us to feel isolated and alone. That's the heart of the story. Jake's journey mirrors many of our own. He starts out confused, unsure of who he is, and feeling disconnected from the world around him. But through his experiences in the peculiar world, he learns that being different isn't something to fear. Instead, it's something to embrace. He also realizes that the people we surround ourselves with, those who accept us for who we truly are what help us find our way. The peculiar children trapped in their endless loop show Jake that time is something that can either trap or free us. The idea of a time loop might seem like a gift at first, but in reality, it's a trap, a way to avoid moving forward. Ultimately, Jake's growth comes from realizing that he can't live in the past forever. He has to step forward, grow, and embrace change. And let's not forget the villain, Baron. He's the perfect foil to the peculiar children's journey. Whereas the children learn to accept their differences, Baron's obsession with immortality and power leads him down a destructive path. His transformation into a Holog, Baron is consumed by his desire to stay the same, and in doing so, he loses everything that makes him human. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of obsession and the importance of letting go when it's time. But the movie isn't just about deep themes and character arcs. It's also about the world that Tim Burton has created. The quirky visuals, the magical realism, and the way each scene feels like stepping into a dream. The peculiar children's powers, the time loops, and the creepy hologs all combine to create an atmosphere that feels both unsettling and beautiful. It's a movie that makes you think, but also makes you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. That's the magic of Miss Peregrine's. It pulls you into its world and makes you see the beauty in the strange and the unusual. What makes this movie unforgettable is the way it makes us reflect on our own lives. It speaks to those who have ever felt like outsiders, those who have ever struggled with what makes them different, and those who have ever wished for something more. The peculiar, children may live in a world of magic, but their struggles are universal. We all have something that sets us apart, something that makes us feel like we don't belong. But just like Jake, we learned that our differences are what make us special, and finding our place in the world is a journey we all must take. So, if you've enjoyed diving deep into this magical and meaningful story, think about how these themes and characters really resonated with you. And some information about it. How do you like our today's video, please? Let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it, share it, and forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.